This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am very happy to be joined today by Elsa Macdonald, Master of Wine, Arterra Wines, Canada. How are you today, Elsa?
I'm very well, Jamie. Nice to see you.
Great to see you. Now, you've just come back from a little bit of travels to Europe. We're still in the middle of this damn pandemic. What kind of impact has the pandemic had upon both yourself and your personal life and Arterra as a company?
Well, I'll answer for myself first, and then I'll talk about the company. I think for me, the first 10 months of the pandemic, I moved in with my dad, basically. I
Right.
was living in a condo in the city, and he was in a big, comfortable house out in the suburbs, and he didn't want to be alone.
Right.
And he needed a little bit of assistance. And during those 10 months, we actually ended up selling the house and moved him into a townhouse. And so a lot of changes there. And I ended up leaving my condo, and I also moved into a small house myself. So a lot of changes personally. And in terms of my work, of course, historically, I've been doing a tremendous amount of education with Arterra, and that had me traveling probably 40% of the time
Right.
across Canada, and then also, of course, to all of our producers to learn new stories and stay in touch with production and so on. And that all came to a grinding halt very quickly. So in terms of my work, I ended up doing a lot of virtual education. Part of the issue, I think, was that we never knew how long we were going to be closed down for, right? At first, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks, and then as the spring rolled on and we got into summer, for our estates in both the Okanagan and in Niagara, we kept on thinking, okay, we're going to be opening, we're going to be opening. So we were trying to keep the staff engaged. And so we would do weekly calls with them and, basically pick a group of wines, and they would pick them up at the wineries, do like a curbside pickup. And we would do sessions with them. And part of the reason was, many of them have worked for the wineries for many years. They know the stories, they certainly know the wines, but this is a new vintage, and let's just keep you together and keep you engaged. And it was really important to a lot of people. And as the summer went on and we started to open up, but only by appointment only, and some weeks we were open and some weeks we were closed, it really affected people dramatically. I ended up doing a lot of Instagram lives and Zoom tastings, and of course we went down the route of exploring the little mini bottles versus big bottles. And so that's really I think I was in the boat of trying to pivot education online. That was sort of the biggest impact to me. In terms of our company, if I think about our sales and marketing offices, the offices closed. Everybody was working from home right from whatever it was, Friday, March 13th. And they continue actually to be closed at this time. Now, people can go into the office. We have switched our offices over. When we do go back, and there had been some talk about maybe going back in January, let's see if that actually gets officially launched now with Omicron.
Yes.
But when we do go back, we'll go back in what they call a hybrid model. And the idea is that anybody who needs to be in the office, people are expected to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week and work from home 2 to 3 days a week. And They kind of came to that conclusion based on, they did a survey of the employees, and a lot of people really like the idea of this hybrid model. And then it's kind of up to each team who needs to be in the office and which day and how they're going to plan the meetings around it and so on. So it's kind of interesting to see how that is when we go back. In terms of operations, in terms of production, wine, of course, was seen as an essential service. So all of our viticulture and our winemaking kept on going through all of this. And I think the biggest concern for the company was always the safety of our employees. I think that was really, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to see it in action. And very quickly at the production facilities, at the wineries, they created cohorts so that certain groups of people would be together in the winery at the same time. And then there would be a shift change and different people would be together in the winery. And those two groups wouldn't necessarily meet. And so, some of the winemakers have told me stories of coming in and they basically had written down on a list, these are the things you need to do, right? You need to pump over that tank and you need to do this, that, and the other thing. And they just simply didn't see each other for a number of months. There was a lot of, testing happening for people on a regular basis to make sure that they were still fit to come to work. So they were affected in that way. We also had to look at, we obviously have a number of migrant workers who come in.
Of course.
And they, when the original lockdown happened, they managed to come in, and we really just tried to keep them away from from the public and the rest of the organization, because for them it was very important that they be allowed to keep on working. And we were, knock on wood, we were very lucky that that they managed to stay healthy, and so that was quite important to us. And of course, it's very important for the business, for the grapes to be grown and so on. Yeah, so that's really what was happening in our production facilities.
As an experienced and accomplished educator, are you in a real rush to get back to the in-person education? And what are the pros and cons for you of doing the virtual education, the virtual learning?
So I'm a big proponent of education, and if the only way to do it is X, then you do X, right? And I think when people had time, keeping people's passion for wine alive and keeping people, there is a personal aspect to the two-way communication that happens when you're doing education. And I think that level of engagement on something that wasn't, have you had your test yet? When are you getting your test? It wasn't about COVID, was actually important to people, emotionally, mentally, and so on. So, I'll start with that. I had actually in October and November started to have some classes at our offices, both in Ontario and in BC. So the offices were open, but nobody was really going in because there was no mandate to go in, but they were available if people wanted to. But what that meant was we had to ensure we had physical distancing. So I looked at our boardrooms, and I would have a class that would have, say, 26 people in it, 30 people in it, and I could fit 16 in the room.
Right.
So we actually ended up doing it in our what would be the equivalent of a cafeteria. So we ended up offering the class in there, and I think we had 19 people in the class, but they were all physically spaced. And in Vancouver, we kept it strictly to 16. So going back and being back in the classroom, I didn't realize till sort of halfway through the second session how much I had missed teaching in person, because 16 people can all talk at the same time, and I can read all their faces at the same time, and I can see, there's 2 converts to sherry in this group. Whereas it was really hard to see that on screen, and I think people are exhausted a little bit with some of this Zoom sessions and Teams and doing everything virtually, and they turn off their cameras.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard when you're teaching to an empty room, and I have some pretty good jokes, but when you get no reaction, it's kind of, so I think that's probably what I was really excited about when I got back live. And it is a better experience, but I'll take virtual over nothing.
Right.
For sure.
That makes sense. Now, what have you observed about the changes in wine retail that have happened over the last, it's coming up on 2 years, because this has changed the field somewhat.
It sure has. Well, you asked about our operations earlier, and we actually do have our own chain of retail stores here in Ontario. The Wine Rack is part of Arterra. And those stores, when it first hit, they actually closed down completely for 2 weeks.
Right.
And during that time, they put up all of the plexiglass barriers, and they put all the stamps on the floor, and really tried to get their head around how do we protect the staff, how do we protect the consumers, yet still make things available. And there was a lot of cleaning regimes put in and cleaning protocols, but we did open up again, and we were actually open 7 days a week. I know LCBO had closed on Mondays, which was a great boon for us. But we felt it was important to be open 7 days a week. So that was one big change for us. I think the other thing that happened was when on-premise closed, when people weren't going to restaurants and they were eating at home more, they suddenly buying in retail was even more important to them. But at the same time, I think people had these conflicting feelings about going out or going out too often. So kind of the convenience mattered, being able to buy. I think more people were turning to the grocery store because they were already going into the grocery store. So if wine was available, they would buy it there. So I think there was a bit of a boom there. And I also think that when people were going, say, to the LCBO, they wanted to get in and out very quickly. And so that really had a benefit for a lot of the big brands, quite frankly, because it was like tried, tested, and true, something they knew. And then the other thing that impacted was the crazy boon we had in 4-liter boxes. People only wanted to go to the store once.
Oh, I
so
see.
they would buy in a much larger format. And in fact, going back to operations, one of the big shifts we had to do was, at that point early in the year, you're bottling so that you're getting ready for the upcoming harvest. And we had to switch our bottling lines to bag-in-the-box lines, convert over a whole bottling line for days and days and days, because that is really where the demand was. So I think that changed over time. I think, as it wore on and people started to, put their drinking in check a little bit. And I think a lot of people also became, more conscious of their health, maybe their weight, those sorts of things. They started drinking a little bit less, and I think there's a trend in premiumization happening.
Right.
So going back to your retail question, what that means is people are looking for alternatives, and it got easier for people to shop again. LCBO opened up on Mondays, but I think the biggest change is probably that the bottle shops were allowed to then sell bottles. And I think as people are starting to not just satisfy their needs to have a drink or to have a daily tipple, they're starting to, explore a little bit more again. I think that's a really interesting opportunity for people now in Ontario.
I feel that in the first year of the pandemic, the whole idea of discovery in an LCBO, for example, like picking up a bottle and having a little perusal of the back label and the like, that was just gone. So you were talking about.
I even felt it, right? Yeah, I felt it less maybe in my wine shopping because I have a cellar, so I started to dig into my cellar, and I bet that was a trend for a lot of people too. But where I felt that was with food shopping, right? Because normally I'd sort of go along and see what was on the shelves and try to get inspired that way. Forget it. I was like making a list. You go in, you get exactly what's on your list, and you get out. So I'm sure it was the same for people with their wine.
Now, I've been pushing for the idea of private bottle shops for the longest time, because we're kind of, we were living in the dark ages in Ontario when it came to that side of wine retail. There are so many bottle shops now. In Toronto, it's almost there are almost as many as there are cannabis dispensaries.
And that's saying something.
Yeah. What makes for a good bottle shop in your mind? Like, what if you were to open a bottle shop, independent of what you do right now, what does a bottle shop have to do to make it stand out from the crowd?
I would say there's two really important things. One of them is their portfolio has to be interesting and relevant to whether it's the neighborhood or whoever it is that they're trying to serve. But also, I think having a knowledgeable staff who knows their portfolio and understands when people are trying to explain what they like, who can help take them on a journey. I think that's sort of the ideal situation that I know Susan down there has, and she kind of has a bit of a memory. These are the last 10 things that I recommended to somebody. And I think if you have that magical formula, that's going to help the whole industry grow, quite frankly, right? Because as people become more engaged, they want to explore more.
Yes.
You don't need somebody to tell you what to drink, but to help you explore and to know where to go, what the options are. I think it really helps.
So apart from digging into your cellar and enjoying what you had put on hold there, were there any other ways that your drinking habits changed over the course of the pandemic?
It's a good question. And I think it changed at different times over the pandemic. Right. I finished my Master of Wine in 2018. So right up until then, the diversity of things I was trying and the number of places that I was frankly going and visiting was huge, right? And it wasn't about drinking, it was about tasting, but I was tasting such a vast array of things to try and be ready for that exam. And then so I think my habits were changing anyway. I think I had a lot of bottles that were sent to me as whole bottles. And so I would, in a way, drink a lot more work wine than I would even then pull things from the cellar. I would sort of pull things specially from the cellar because I didn't want it to go to waste. As I mentioned, I had moved to a new house. So I made friends with a lot of neighbors that way with bottles. You know, they weren't worried about COVID when they were receiving, 2/3 of a bottle or whatever.
Now we're just about to head into we're in the festive season, I guess. What are you looking forward to enjoying between now and New Year?
Just about everything. I am going to an event where the theme is Eastern France. Okay. So that would be anything from Champagne to Burgundy to Jura, even like right down to the bottom, including Bandol and a few areas like that. Nice, yeah, so that's kind of an interesting theme, and it's always fun when I'm actually going to be bringing a Jura Sauvignon to that. So lovely. That's a good excuse to have something different. There's a few masters of wine who are in town, so we're going to be getting together. So I'm sure there will be a little bit of Meursault and some champagne. It's funny, I didn't actually even think about the fact that the two parties have a slightly similar theme, but we've also got somebody coming from Australia who will bring us some treats from there. For myself, I'm a big fan of crisp. I'm a bit of an acid addict, I like to say. So a lot of the crisp whites in terms of the style.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Elsa, thank you so much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. Have a wonderful and safe Christmas, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Thank you. Very nice to see you, Jamie. Take care. Enjoy your holiday.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.